Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Hotels can often feel like strange spaces when you're in them. Serving as a temporary refuge for people of all walks of life, hotels seek to offer us all of the comforts of home, often when we're hundreds or even thousands of miles away from the real thing. In this way, they occupy a sort of uncanny valley between the intimate and the unfamiliar, places where we are meant to relax in relative proximity to total strangers, where we have no idea who has been there before us and who will check in long after we leave. It's no wonder then that hotels serve as the setting for some of the most iconically creepy stories in our culture, from movies like Psycho and The Shining to urban legends about what happens at seedy motels on the sides of lonely highways. Though it's true that our imaginations often conjure far darker stories about these locations than we need seriously worry about, occasionally real life delivers something truly shocking. Today, we wanted to take a look at a few examples of chilling murder cases that took place at hotels, some of which remain disturbingly unsolved. For this list, we'll be covering cases that happened at both hotels and motels, as we feel the distinction isn't that important for the purposes of our subject matter. Before we get to our list, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. With that out of the way, here are 5 truly chilling murders that took place at hotels. On February 27, 2020, 27-year-old Anthony Fuerte was arrested on suspicion of first-degree robbery and carjacking in Spokane, Washington. According to women who were the victims in 2 separate incidents that afternoon, Fuerte ran up to the side of their vehicles, demanding that they get out and give him their keys. His hands and clothes were covered in blood. Fortunately, police were able to catch up with Fuerte relatively quickly, and he was arrested later that afternoon behind a local coffee shop. Though news of the attacks was deeply disturbing, it was nothing compared to the discovery that would follow. The next morning, a housekeeper at the Roadway Inn in North Spokane was alarmed to find blood on one of the motel room door handles. The room was locked, and the housekeeper received no answer when she knocked. Using a spare key, she was able to gain entry, upon which she made a gruesome discovery. The body of a young woman was lying face down on one of the 2 beds, nude from the waist down. She was later identified as 24-year-old Makayla Young. Young had suffered multiple vicious stab wounds to the point where she had been nearly decapitated. Though an attempt had been made to clean up the crime scene, the room had obviously been the site of a brutal struggle. There was blood spatter more than 10 feet away on an adjacent bed, on the walls, and several items around the room were broken. When police obtained the motel's records, they discovered that the room had been rented by a man named Chad Benefield. Benefield told investigators that he had rented the room for Anthony Fuerte and his friend Lionel White. Sure enough, a trail of blood and bloody handprints was found at the scene, leading to the same coffee shop where Fuerte had been arrested the previous day. Though Lionel White denied having any involvement in Young's murder, housekeeping staff claimed to have seen him placing bloody towels outside the room's door the day of the killing. When he was arrested, police found methamphetamine and a pointed object several inches long in his possession. Both men have been charged with the second-degree murder of Makayla Young and have pleaded not guilty. They are currently awaiting trial.
On September 12, 1980, Rose Burkert and Roger Atkinson set off on what was supposed to be a romantic weekend getaway. The couple eventually found their way to the Amana Holiday Inn, located along Interstate 90 near Williamsburg, Iowa. In what would turn out to be a cruel twist of fate, Burkert and Atkinson were first told that there was no room at the hotel due to a mortician's conference that was in town. However, when a front desk employee double-checked the register, they discovered that there had been a cancellation. The couple was given the keys to room 260 just before 8 o'clock that evening and went on their way. Things seemed perfectly normal until the hotel's housekeepers arrived at room 260 the following morning. Though there was no sign on the door, her knocks went unanswered, and she found the door locked. After locating the manager to retrieve a passkey, the housekeeper tried the door again. She was completely unprepared for the sight that would greet her on the other side. Peering in, she first saw feet on the bed. For a split second, she thought the couple might be asleep, until she noticed the blood splattered across the bed's headboard, the carpet, and the walls. When Iowa County sheriffs arrived at the hotel, the full brutality of the crime scene became clear. Burkert and Atkinson were both laying face down on the bed, the back of their skulls horrifically wounded from what appeared to be numerous blows from an axe or hatchet. A number of Atkinson's fingers had also been severed, injuries that had clearly been sustained while attempting to defend himself from the grisly attack. A thorough autopsy on the couple revealed that both had died from severe blood loss and trauma to the brain. A closer inspection of the crime scene revealed several chilling details. First, there were no signs of forced entry into room 260. The room was also located in the interior of the hotel, so it would not have been accessible by a window or other exterior door. Secondly, chairs were discovered at the side of the couple's bed, implying that the killer or killers may have engaged in a conversation with their victims before carrying out the brutal crime. Lastly, and perhaps most bizarrely, the word "this" was found scrawled on the bathroom mirror with a piece of soap. Rumors about the killings began to spread throughout Iowa and Missouri. A popular suspicion was that Burkert's ex-boyfriend, Danny Burton, was behind the murders. Burton had been accused of stalking Burkert in the weeks leading up to her murder and had had a complaint filed against him with local police. However, Burton had an alibi for the night of the killings and later passed a polygraph test. Another rumor was that Atkinson's uncle, a serial killer named Charles Hatcher, could be responsible for the terrible crime. Hatcher had recently escaped from a Nebraska mental health center. In all, police interviewed 400 people in connection to the crime, but ultimately could not crack the case. The grisly murders remain unsolved more than 40 years later.
On the night of September 8, 2013, 20-year-old Alex Fraser met up with his friend James McCullough, a small-time drug dealer in their hometown of Orangeville, Ontario. The pair would regularly meet up on weekends to drink and do drugs together. On this particular night, the men planned to take a 2-hour cab ride from Orangeville to the university town of London for a night of drinking, partying, and shopping. They also planned to rob an old residence where McCullough had once lived while attending Fanshawe College. In addition to alcohol and drugs, McCullough also took 2 hockey bags with him, as well as a large kitchen knife and sharpener. He said the weapon was for personal protection, and the bags were for the loot that they planned to steal. Unbeknownst to Fraser, however, McCullough had far darker intentions for the items that he brought along with him that night. After arriving in London, the men checked into a Travelodge hotel, where McCullough gave a fake name and address and paid for the room in cash. The men then began drinking heavily, talking about their plans for the rest of the evening. Several hours later, police received a frantic 911 call from McCullough, who claimed that someone was dead in his room and that he was unarmed. When police arrived, they found a horrific scene waiting for them. Fraser had been brutally murdered and dismembered, his remains stuffed into McCullough's hockey bags. McCullough offered several different stories to police that quickly unraveled. The most widely reported of these was that he had acted in self-defense when Fraser had tried to grab his genitals after he had come out of the shower. However, later evidence led police to believe that the crime was premeditated and that McCullough had organized the trip solely to act out a murderous fantasy. An autopsy revealed that Fraser had been stabbed 29 times. His body had then been methodically dismembered in the room's tub, before being placed in garbage bags stolen from housekeeping staff and eventually transferred to the hockey bags. While McCullough spent several hours cleaning up the crime scene with soap and water, he simultaneously started contacting people who he thought might give him a ride out of town. It was only after he could not convince anyone to pick him up that he called the police. The final damning bit of evidence was a piece of bone from Fraser's body that police found in McCullough's backpack. The bone had been cleaned, and it was believed that he had intended to keep it as a sort of trophy. McCullough was convicted of first-degree murder in April of 2016. He received a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years.
On the morning of March 18, 1965, 54-year-old Elfie McDonald set off for the Bangor house, where she worked as a chambermaid. The hotel was one of the most prestigious in the state of Maine at the time, serving as host for several presidents, entertainers, athletes, and other famous figures of the era. The building was known for its luxurious features, with fireplaces in each room and ballrooms on the first and second floor. It was built the year the city was founded in 1834. Elfie arrived at work around 9 o'clock that morning and began to make her daily rounds. She was spotted by several co-workers as she carried out her normal assignments, the last of whom saw her around lunchtime. But by 2 p.m., Elfie was nowhere to be found. Her supervisor, knowing that she had an asthmatic condition, started to grow concerned and ordered a search of the hotel. Just before 3 o'clock, when Elfie's shift normally would have been finished, one of the other chambermaids made a horrifying discovery. She found Alfie's partially nude and lifeless body in a third-floor room, strangled and sexually assaulted. Hotel staff quickly realized that the room had not been rented for the past 2 days and would not have required maid services. Moreover, even if someone had been staying there, it would not normally have been on Alfie's cleaning route. But the most alarming detail of the crime was the manner in which the chambermaid had been killed. She had been strangled with her own nylon stockings, which were found tightly wrapped around her neck. The murder was eerily similar to a series of then unsolved stranglings that were terrorizing the city of Boston. Detectives from what was called the Strangler Squad initially raced down to the city of Bangor to see if they could gather new evidence. However, ultimately, investigators decided that the case was not related to the other killings in Boston. Of particular importance was the way the stocking had been wrapped around the victim's neck. In the Boston cases, the stockings had been tied. In the Elfie McDonald murder, the stocking was simply wrapped around several times. It was eventually concluded that the Boston Strangler, a man later learned to be named Albert DeSalvo, had committed his final crime more than a year before the murder of Elfie McDonald. Unfortunately, this left police no closer to solving the brutal killing that had taken place at the Bangor house. After questioning more than 100 people, investigators believed one of the male guests at the hotel must have been behind the murder. They zeroed in on one suspicious person who had been seen near the crime scene shortly before the murder and released a composite sketch. However, this lead soon fell through, as did many others. As years passed, members of the police force were eventually convinced that they had found the perpetrator, but cited a lack of evidence when commenting on the story to the local press. Sadly, this would be the last concrete information to emerge in the case, and the mysterious suspect would remain unnamed. More than 55 years later, the infamous Bangor house murder remains unsolved.
On August 28, 1943, 33-year-old Maoma Ridings checked into room 729 at the Claypool Hotel in downtown Indianapolis. Ridings was a corporal in the Women's Army Corps and was stationed at nearby Camp Atterbury in south-central Indiana. Ridings was no stranger to Indianapolis's hotel scene. That summer, she was a frequent weekend guest at the Claypool, after being kicked out of the Hotel Severin for refusing to pay for damages to a room she had made while partying. On her weekend trips, Ridings was frequently accompanied by another woman from Camp Atterbury, her friend Ruth Hoover. However, she often chose to go out alone as well, when she was seeking the company of men. On this night in August, she reportedly planned to do just that, but things would quickly take a dark turn. At 8 p.m. that evening, a housekeeper doing her nightly room inspection knocked on Ridings' door. When she received no answer, she entered and made a chilling discovery. Ridings was lying in a pool of her own blood. Her face, wrists, and throat had all been slashed. Nearby was a broken whiskey bottle. Police determined that she had likely died from a blow to the head from the full bottle, and that the killer had used pieces of broken glass to inflict the lacerations. A number of strange leads began to emerge concerning the brutal killing. Earlier that evening, a call had been made to the hotel switchboard operator that a woman was heard screaming in a room occupied by a Camp Atterbury soldier. The soldier's room was located on the same floor where Maoma Ridings was staying. However, by the time a hotel employee could arrive to investigate, the room was empty, and the soldier had checked out. The last people to see Ridings alive were two bellboys named Alfred Bain and Robert Wolfington, who had delivered cans of Coca-Cola to her room that night. They said that Ridings appeared to be doing just fine, but said that she was accompanied by a mysterious woman. The woman appeared to be similar in age to Ridings and had black hair and was wearing a black dress, hat, and veil. According to the bellboys, both women appeared to be in good spirits. Believing that the woman in black might be Ruth Hoover, police first questioned her about that night's events. However, Hoover had been in an entirely different state at the time of the murder, visiting relatives in her hometown of Water Valley, Mississippi. Hoover did have a piece of information for investigators, though, telling them that Ridings had testified against a Camp Atterbury soldier at a court-martial hearing days earlier. Frustratingly, this too proved to be a dead end, as the soldier in question was in the camp's guardhouse on the night of the killing. With little left to go on, police desperately tried to track down the mysterious woman in black. Though a suspect briefly emerged more than a year later after a tip from a man named William Llewellyn, it proved to be wildly unreliable. Llewellyn told police that his ex-wife, Wyona Kidd, was the elusive woman in black, but he changed his story so many times that it ultimately proved useless to investigators. Sadly, no one was ever charged with the brutal murder, and the case remains disturbingly unsolved to this day. That brings us to the end of our list. Know of any other hotel murder cases that you think we should look into? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. Thank you for watching.